Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Q&A with Republican for Governor Jack Ciattarelli. I'm Ralph Albert Thomas, CEO and Executive Director of the New Jersey Society of CPAs. Before I introduce our guest of honor today, I want to review a few administrative things. First, I want to welcome those of you who are on our live stream this morning, watching this event, or either on Facebook or our website. The NJCPA is pleased to offer a forum where members can meet and listen to the candidates who are vying to lead our state government. It's important to hear directly from them their views and ideas on how to innovate, create, and grow our state, as well as have the opportunity to express our concerns on the issues important to the business community and citizens of New Jersey. Our guest today is New Jersey Assemblyman Jack Ciattarelli, representing the 16th Legislative District, which is a district that I'm in now after restructuring the districts. Assemblyman Ciattarelli is a CPA, inactive, and member of the New Jersey Society of CPA, so that's a great thing. For the next 45 minutes or so, we'll engage in hopefully what will be a lively discussion and Q&A session. Following some opening remarks by the Assemblyman, I'll pose several prepared questions, after which we will take questions from our in-person audience and those streaming live. Okay, get our paperwork here. In the interest of time, we're asking our audience members to submit their questions electronically. If you wish to submit a question, please go to slide.com. Event code is #2071. We have also tabletop cards, or I believe, no, we don't have the tabletop cards here. But if you also, for those in the audience here, you can use that electronic submission format again. Again, it's slido.com, #2071. Questions will be forwarded to me, and I will ask as many as time allows. Out of respect for the Assemblyman and your fellow audience members, please submit a question, not a policy statement or comment, okay? This is not a dissertation or PhD program, so please be respectful of that. Lastly, we encourage you to tweet, post, and ask questions using your mobile devices, but also ask that you turn them on silent so there's no interruption. And I think I've gotten everything out of the way from an administrative standpoint. So Assemblyman Ciattarelli, we appreciate the opportunity to pose a number of questions to you on topics that are important, not only to the NJCPA and our members, but to their clients and employers. So with that, the floor is yours to share with us why you're running for governor and tell us your vision to make the Garden State more competitive within the region.
Well, thank you, Ralph. It's great to be with you all, and welcome to everybody that's watching as we stream live. It's always great to be in the company of CPAs. One promise I make is there'll be more CPAs in my administration than any administration prior in the state of New Jersey.
All right. Looking forward to that.
Okay, you have my word on that. You have my word on that. So I'm running for governor because I believe New Jersey's broke, and I have some very, very specific ideas on how to fix it. I've served 2 terms at the municipal level, 2 terms at the freehold level, and now 5 years in the Assembly, but I've never not been in the private sector full-time since the time I came home from Seton Hall University with my MBA CPA. The first 10 years of my career I spent in corporate finance, Dun & Bradstreet, Research Cottrell. Then I went back and did some public accounting, and what I found out is the discipline that I love so much at Seton Hall, and I've even taught as an adjunct professor at Seton Hall Financial Accounting, I didn't really enjoy in practice. So I decided to go and join a firm that was in the medical publishing business. That was the largest client at the last accounting firm that I worked for, and ended up in my own medical publishing business. So I am inactive, but again, it's great to be in the company of CPAs. Again, I believe New Jersey is broke. I have specific ideas on how to fix it. I'm running for governor because if I've learned anything in my 5+ years in the legislature, the only way to achieve seismic change is from the governor's seat. I went to Trenton to fix the school funding formula because it's what drives the property tax crisis in this state, and that affects every individual, whether that person is a homeowner or a renter. It affects every business, whether the business owns its own property or is a renter. I went there to fix the tax code. I think that our tax code is in dire need of a complete overhaul, so I hope today that we'll get to talk about my tax restructuring. I went there to solve the pension crisis. I believe that public worker benefits are still a bit too generous, and that we need to make the pension system solvent, but not by going to New Jerseyans for more taxes. I think that we can make the New Jersey pension system solvent by doing a few reforms on par with what it is you've seen in the private sector, and hopefully we'll get to talk about that today. I'd also like to see us downsize state government. I believe it is bloated, antiquated. I can give you some very, very powerful examples of how it needs to be modernized and streamlined and actually more efficient for every individual who has to interface with government and every business that has to interface with government. And the last point in my plan that I hope that we'll get to has a lot to do with the dysfunctional relationship between the executive branch in New Jersey and our New Jersey congressional delegation. I think there needs to be a better communication strategy and advocacy between the governorship and our entire New Jersey congressional delegation, both U.S. senators and all 12 congresspeople, to advocate on behalf of New Jersey. So those are some of the highlights of my 5-point plan. It's a very, very specific plan. As an MBA CPA, entrepreneur, and 2-time successful Main Street business owner, I've taken this approach. The 8.9 million citizens of this state are shareholders in this entity we know as New Jersey. And I'm only giving them what it is I've always given my investors, my customers, and my employees, a very, very specific plan on how to turn things around. I'm only really asking voters to consider what it is I've always asked of people asking for my vote. What is it you're going to do exactly? What I find is CPAs in general, we're not good with the platitudes, the generalities, and the rhetoric. It's either a debit or a credit. It's either balance sheet or income statement. So my plan is very, very black and white in terms of what it is that we need to do, in my opinion, to move things forward. And what I love sharing with a great many people, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Ralph.
Okay.
And Paul Stalin usually corrects me if I don't get the statistic perfectly correct, but I think I've got it right. And I particularly like to share this story with attorneys, all in good fun. In the 240-year history of this country, of all the men and women that have served in the Congress, the House of Representatives, and the U.S. Senate, only 16 have been CPAs. And in the 240-year history of this country, of all the people that have served as governor, only 3 have been CPAs. So here's what I always say to the attorneys. Give us a shot. Give us a shot.
Well, we're going to give you a shot today to talk about some of the things that you've articulated in your 5-point plan as a means to restoring and revitalizing New Jersey as a great place not only to live, work, and retire.
Right.
Those 5 points, just so that for those of you who may not be aware, are school funding reform, tax reform, employee benefits reform, streamlining government, and bipartisan communication. So let's get off on a foot and talk about tax reform. According to a 2016 study, and there have been many by the Tax Foundation, New Jersey has one of the worst tax climates of any state in the nation. As governor, would you propose any major tax changes for individuals or businesses?
So this point in my plan is really a major overhaul. It's a major reform. I call it a tax restructuring. If any of the other gubernatorial candidates come before you and say that my plan raises your taxes, that is not true. My plan lowers the overall tax burden for every single New Jerseyan, but I think it does it in a very, very responsible way. Number one, we need to make sure that the estate tax stays abolished. There's already talk in Trenton of bringing it back because of the way that our budget is experiencing deficits. We need to make sure the estate tax stays abolished. We need to make sure that we get rid of the transfer inheritance tax, which actually affects more New Jerseyans than the estate tax. I'd like to see us allow for the carry forward of capital losses and accelerate depreciation like you see on the federal return. I think that would be a real plus for the business community. I'd like to see us phase out the taxing of the gain on the sale of a family-owned business. Mom and pop shops are what drive the New Jersey economy, small employers. They drive the labor markets. People start a salon, a laundromat, a pizzeria for $50,000 or $60,000, work for 15 or 20 years, and now have the opportunity to sell it for $250,000 or $300,000 or more. Let them pay their capital gains to the federal government, but let's not tax the gain on the sale of a family-owned business here in New Jersey, mom and pop shops. And we all know the IRS defines a family-owned business as 51% or more owned by 5 or fewer people. I don't believe we should ever tax the gain on the sale of a home in New Jersey. It's not a stock or a bond, it's a home. I don't believe we should tax the gain on the sale of a second home. How many New Jerseyans own a bungalow at the Jersey Shore, one of our lakefronts? Right. Paid property taxes that funded municipal, county, and school services that they never really used, and then we tax the gain on the sale of a second home? I don't think we should do that in New Jersey. I think we should phase out the corporate business tax in New Jersey, 1% a year over a 9 to 10 year period. The top bracket, I think, is 9%. When you think about what it is that corporations in this state pay in property taxes, To me, to add the extra burden of also having them pay a corporate business tax. The fact of the matter is the corporate business tax is less than 10% of our revenues in Trenton. And it is dwindling every single year because fewer and fewer businesses incorporate here. I prefer this route as opposed to a lot of the corporate welfare that we use to convince companies to stay or to come. I think the better way to change the optics of New Jersey is just to phase out the corporate business tax over a 10-year period. And the CPA, needs to balance the ledger. So we can do this by playing with our marginal tax rates, but also closing some corporate loopholes so we do not have deficits in the short term as we experience what I predict will be growth in the mid to long term. But more than anything, I really believe we need a tax restructuring to change the optics, perception, and brand of New Jersey. And these kind of changes, I think, would go a long way toward doing that.
Thank you. One of the conversations that's cropped up recently is the concept of a millionaire's tax. And a millionaire's tax where the proceeds would be used to help address the pension obligation. Would you oppose or support a millionaire's tax?
First of all, I don't like labels because I think it pits us against one another, and we shouldn't demonize people who've been very successful by calling it a millionaire's tax. I do suggest some changes in our marginal tax rates, but know this, the overall tax burden for any individual or business under my plan goes down for everyone. So the notion of having a millionaire's tax to fix the pension, I look forward to discussing my pension reform plan, which points the pension towards solvency without taking another penny of taxes from anyone in the state.
Okay. You've already talked about how you feel on major tax changes and whatnot. Let's move to your school funding reform plan as a way to solve the property tax crisis. Could you elaborate what's entailed in your plan?
So if anything demonstrates how desperately we need reform of the school funding reform plan, think about these two, what I think are very, very powerful examples. We're in Roseland right now. A $400,000 house in Roseland pays more in property taxes than an $800,000 house in Jersey City. Middle-class people in Roseland are paying through the nose to send their children to pre-K, but millionaires get to send their kids to pre-K for free in Hoboken. These are a couple of things that have just been, call them loopholes, call them inadvertent consequences of the 2008 School Funding Reform Act put in place by John Corzine. They're things the Supreme Court does not know. It's all because of the way that we distribute school funding in this state. Right now, it is terribly flawed, it is blatantly unfair, and I think, quite frankly, it's a violation of the equal benefit clause of the state constitution, which says no community is supposed to benefit at the expense of another. I will tell you that Jersey City and Hoboken are benefiting at the expense of Roseland, Parsippany, Bridgewater, Manville, Egg Harbor Township, and Galloway. And so it is time. It is time. The biggest challenge with the school funding that needs to be reformed is something called adjustment aid. It's acted as a whole harmless clause, which basically says no town state aid shall be reduced, even as it revitalizes. Now, I would challenge us all as Americans and responsible citizens to consider something. No form of government aid, was ever meant to be a subsidy in perpetuity. All forms of government aid are supposed to be a crutch until you can walk on your own 2 feet. Unemployment insurance is the most perfect example. You lose your job, there's unemployment insurance for 26 weeks. We hope that you'll find a job during those 26 weeks, but at the end of the 26 weeks, unemployment stops. I tell you this, Jersey City and Hoboken can now stand on their own 2 feet. They can afford to contribute more toward their local school system. Jersey City is overfunded because of this whole harmless clause known as adjustment aid by $160 million. Hoboken is overfunded because of this whole harmless clause by $7.5 million. Paul Stalin is very familiar with a town in my district known as Manville. Manville is as blue-collar and middle class can get. Ravaged by the exit of industry, ravaged by flooding. They are underfunded by $9 million. They get $9 million less than they're supposed to, which is why a $400,000 house in Manville pays more in property taxes than an $800,000 house in Jersey City. Why are middle-class people in Manville paying through the nose to send their kids to pre-K, but millionaires get it for free in Hoboken? This isn't right. It needs to be corrected, and it's long time overdue. Because of school funding, I'll share one other very compelling statistic with you. Because of the way school funding is very, very inequitably distributed, the cost per student in Asbury Park is $35,000 a year. That's more than it is to send any one of our children to Rutgers full-time, including room and board. Think about that for a second. There is not a property tax crisis in every town in New Jersey. I tell you this, there's no property tax crisis in Jersey City and Hoboken because of the way we distribute school aid. After 40 years, it is time for a reevaluation and, if necessary, a different kind of argument before the Supreme Court.
That's going to be interesting to see how this unravels. I'd like to ask your thoughts on one of your opponents came out with a plan called the circuit breaker. What are your thoughts? It tries to address some of the same issues on the property tax basis. It's gotten a little bit of criticism by the press. What are your thoughts on it?
So listen, I applaud any candidate that at least addresses the fact that we have a property tax crisis in New Jersey. Here's my issue with the circuit breaker. It's based on promises that can't be kept. There isn't a single aspect of my five-point plan that's based on an assumption. I take what it is we currently have to work with and redeploy it in a different way to make equity across the board here in New Jersey. The circuit breaker plan is based on, first and foremost, $250 million in what I believe to be phantom savings from state audits that need to be performed. The other part of it is it's based on revenue growth. Now, we all know, I think the people particularly in this room, we've had 11 credit downgrades in New Jersey over the past 7 years. And that's because we've had revenue shortfall after revenue shortfall after revenue shortfall. So for a candidate to promise immediate property tax relief when there are these state audits that need to be performed to produce supposedly $250 million in savings and have 2/3 of this circuit breaker plan based on revenue growth, which I think is a bit irresponsible after what we've been through over the past 7 years, it just doesn't seem to me to be a responsible way to really address property tax relief.
Okay. Let me throw out another idea that has been circulating by one of your candidate for governor, and the whole notion of a state bank. There's only been one in the history of the country, and that was in, I would believe, North Dakota, that we had a state bank.
So a couple things come to mind. Number one, this is a 100-year-old idea. No other state has replicated it. The most recent state to study this approach is Massachusetts, which 2 years ago convened 21 experts in the field, citizens at large, and the vote went 20 to nothing to 1 abstention not to do it. A state bank of New Jersey will not fix the property tax crisis. It won't fix the school funding crisis. It won't fix the tax code crisis. It won't change public workers' benefits or solve the pension crisis. And quite frankly, at this point in time, with the climate being what it is in New Jersey, I can't see taking more business away from private sector banks to give it to a state-owned bank. I think it's the wrong idea at the wrong time.
Okay. Let's shift the conversation a little bit. We've got a good question that's come in from Anonymous. Okay, Anonymous?
That usually means an opponent.
No, the question is, how would you reach across the aisle and work with Democrats? Governors from both parties have tried and failed. And that's been a big issue in New Jersey, the political wrangling. We're known so much about that, and as opposed to things getting done. Give us your thoughts. And you actually mentioned as one of your 5-point plans, bipartisan communication. But you talked about it primarily with the congressional. How do you get bipartisan conversation to happen here in New Jersey?
It's a great question. And listen, I'm true to my Republican principles, which I really consider to be American ideals. Self-reliance, free enterprise, smaller government, lower taxes. But at the end of the day, I'm a problem solver. I've always had a pragmatic discipline to me in problem solving. That's what's made me successful as a business owner with Fortune 100 clients. The other thing I would offer is this. The 7 times that I've won election, 2 times at the municipal level, 2 times at the county freeholder level, and now 3 times in the 16th legislative district, Democrats have outnumbered Republicans. Democrats have outnumbered Republicans. And the last thing I would say is if you look at my voting record and take a look at my relationship with people on the other side of the aisle, yes, I'm proud to be a Republican, but I'm not rigid in my ideology, and I'm not a hyper-partisan. I'm really about moving the state of New Jersey forward. And my relationship with folks on the other side of the aisle I would characterize as excellent, because they know me not to be a hyper-partisan and not rigid in my ideology. And that kind of respect, I think, will pay dividends for me as governor.
Okay. Another big conversation piece, and we talked about it earlier, is the pension obligation. Last November, we were quite or proud of that. We were close to it becoming a ballot initiative. Would you support a ballot initiative? Well, obviously, on a ballot initiative, a governor can't do anything. But just talk about your thoughts on whether something like the pension obligation should become a ballot initiative, and what are the ramifications, the unintended consequences that you would see out of that? Certainly our members, when we polled them, were not in favor of the ballot initiative on the pension obligation.
Our Constitution is sacrosanct, and that does not mean there aren't issues from time to time that warrant amending. But I think that we need to be very, very careful. Democracy has its way to it. And just because a legislature cannot get a governor to go along with it doesn't mean they should turn around and amend the Constitution every single time that they feel strongly about something. I think a perfect example of this is minimum wage. So they amended the Constitution for minimum wage by indexing it for inflation, and then when that didn't work out because of the marketplace, now they want to do it again by making the minimum wage $15 an hour. There's a term that's offensive to some, but I think it's a very, very accurate term. Let's not bastardize our Constitution with all these amendments. We have a democracy, and just because a legislature can't get its way with a governor does not mean that it should go around and amend the Constitution left and right. But I do hope that we can talk about how to reform the pension system without having to go by way of a constitutional amendment.
Well, let's hear your thoughts on how you would attack the whole pension obligation. You know, the Healy-Burns Commission has met. They met and I thought had some good thoughts and were on a good track, but then all of a sudden things broke down. What would you do to turn that around?
I'd like to first start with a very powerful example. My mom is 85 years old. My dad worked on the line for public service, electric and gas, street department, gas distribution for 38 years. He's gone. He's gone now, deceased. My mom worked 33 years on the line, quality assurance for J&J. She collects his pension, she collects her pension, and she collects her Social Security. And those three checks add up to $27,000 a month each month. $27,000 each month. $27,000. My mom's a stroke survivor, so she's medically intensive. So she opted into Medicare Part B, which means $109 a month is deducted from her Social Security check. She gets $109 less a month of spending because of Medicare Part B. It's a great deal. It's the right thing to do. Her favorite CPA advised her on it. We can have retirees from the state and retirees from our school districts tomorrow whose pension plus Social Security, and don't forget, we all know the employer taxpayer paid for 1/2 of the Social Security, whose pension plus Social Security will be $70,000, $80,000, $90,000. And do you know what their out-of-pocket expense will be for the post-retirement health care benefit? Zero.
Zero.
It's not on par with what goes on in the private sector. It's one of the reasons why we do not make the full pension payment, because we're paying for the post-retirement health care benefit on a cash basis each year for hundreds of thousands of retirees. So here's what I say. I'm not going back to the people of New Jersey for another dime to make the pension system solvent, which, by the way, Standard & Poor's and Moody's say is insolvent in January 2027. We make all those with less than 10 years of employment in the public sector go into a cash balance plan. That's in the Healy-Burns plan. We have all new hires go into a 401k. That's in the Healy-Burns plan. And we have all current and future retirees whose pension plus Social Security is more than $50,000 begin to contribute on a sliding scale toward their own post-retirement health care benefit. Now, I will take every penny saved with those three little fair reforms. Painful? Yes, but fair in light of all the circumstances. I will take every penny and not give you an income tax cut or a homestead property tax rebate 2 days before election, which is what Trenton is famous for. I will take every dime of that and put it back into the pension system, and that's how you point it toward solvency. You all know better than anybody. I've done pension accounting when I practiced. You have to decrease the long-term unfunded liability, decrease the current expense, and increase the current payment. And that's how you point the system towards solvency. And interestingly enough, when I declared my candidacy and came out with my 5-point plan, Tom Byrne, a very prominent Democrat, called me up and said, "You read our report?" I said, "Tom, I'm embarrassed. I did not." He said, "Well, all the recommendations are the same." I said, "Well, great minds think alike, Tom. What can I tell you?" But that's how I would point the system towards solvency. The tragedy of all tragedies would be come January 2027. and 800,000 retirees do not get their pension check. We can't let that happen. But I do think we need to come to grips with the new reality that the post-retirement health care benefit has tripled in the last 10 years in terms of its cost, that people are contributing nothing to it despite their pension plus their Social Security, and people living into their 80s and 90s. Circumstances have changed dramatically.
Your five-point plan doesn't address many of the progressive agenda bills, such as minimum wage, mandatory paid sick leave. Where do you stand on these points, particularly as it would have a great impact on Main Street businesses here in New Jersey?
My five-point plan focuses on the crises that ruin our economy and punish New Jerseyans every single day. That does not mean that I'm not prepared to discuss or have my own ideas on all other things. I do believe there needs to be an increase in the minimum wage over a specified period of time up to possibly $10 an hour. But this notion of going to $15 an hour is the wrong public policy at the worst possible time. New Jersey's economy is still very fragile, and let's face it, this is a state in which small employers drive our economy and drive our labor markets. And the notion of my 16-year-old who bags groceries at the local produce shop in Surf City in the summer is making the equivalent of $30,000 a year, I don't know how the hell I'm going to get him to cut the grass anymore. I can't afford him. You get my point. You get my point. This is not the right policy. I think, and it should not be in the Constitution, minimum wage is something that a legislature and the executive branch should visit every 5 to 6 to 7 years or so to see what is necessary. I also think increasing the minimum wage is actually cruel in some ways to the unskilled who use entry-level positions to learn a skill and begin to climb the ladder in society. So we need to be careful of the unintended consequences of a $15 minimum wage. The second part of their question had to do with, it was minimum wage and?
Mandatory paid sick leave. That's another initiative that has come up quite a bit in the legislature.
Listen, these are feel-good proposals. At the same time, who would disagree that we need paid family leave? The question is, how do you do it? How best do you do it? A great many big companies already do this. Right. What other companies do is allow you to accrue unused sick time, not to get a big check when you leave the company, but to accrue unused sick time whenever there has to be a prolonged absence for something like paid family leave, the type of absences that it addresses. We need to be very, very careful. And again, considering the fact that it's small employers that drive the New Jersey economy, and that our economy remains fragile.
Okay. There's a question that come in on the federal tax reform plan. I think you've probably addressed that in terms of your view of the impact on New Jerseyans, particularly since they have the highest property taxes in the country, probably. I think the statistics are we pay somewhere around $8,500 on average versus a average of everyone else of $3,800, which is a huge thing. Good question coming here, which says we need more people, people with the competencies and values of CPAs in government and leadership. How can we help you get your name out? Oh, that's a promotional thing. Okay, all right.
Well, listen, if you like what you hear from Jack Ciattarelli and like what you see in terms of my five-point plan, advocate, talk to folks, talk to voters. That this is someone you believe in, and I talk an awful lot about going in a new direction. And when I say that, I mean not just with our policies, with our politics. I really do. Mm-hmm. And so a friend recently said to me, I can't think of a worse time to be governor of New Jersey, but quite frankly, I can't think of a better time. I like being a wartime general. I very much enjoyed running my business over the past 16 years, but I'd be lying if I told you I didn't enjoy the challenges. I wish the recession never came. But it's easy to steer the ship during calm seas. And we've had a really, really good couple of years, and I think it's because we navigated the Great Recession really, really well. And I enjoyed the challenge that provided.
Yeah. Another big topic that has risen, died, come back again, is the whole notion of consolidated services at the municipal level. The fact that we have 560 school districts, or if the number's right, or somewhere in that neighborhood, and we have a number of communities that don't even have schools, but they have the infrastructure to support them, just like everybody else. What are your thoughts on that?
So our property tax crisis in this state is primarily driven by the school funding formula and the inequitable distribution of state aid. It's also driven in small part by all the duplication, all the fragmentation, all the inefficiencies associated with 565 towns and 611 school districts. Now, as a Somerset County freeholder, I tried to commit political suicide. I actually tried to combine 19 little police departments into one regionalized force, North, Central, and South. At the outset of that study, I had the blessing of all 19 mayors, 19 to nothing. And we spent 2 years doing a first-of-its-kind study that showed that this new regionalized force, which, by the way, would have a governing body set up of the 19 mayors, it showed an improved product and $94 million in savings over a 10-year period. And it was time to implement the study. And the vote went 2 to 17. 2 mayors stayed yes, 17 voted no. I understand the challenges of home rule here in New Jersey. Here's what I will do as governor, which is different from what Corzine did. Corzine made seed money available to do feasibility analyses on how to regionalize, consolidate services, or consolidate towns. Many towns took that money, did the study, and when the study proved worthy, they still didn't implement it, which ultimately was a waste of taxpayer dollars, right? Here's what I will do. Locals, you're going to have to put your money where your mouth is. Do like we did in Somerset County with the police study, pay for it yourself. And if you decide to go ahead, the state of New Jersey will pick up 100% of the one-time upfront costs, which many times serve as an impediment to the regionalization consolidation. I used to represent 15 towns in the 16th legislative district. I now represent 14 towns. Why? Because Princeton Borough and Princeton Township became one. The state paid for the entire study. We picked up the one-time upfront costs. On day one, 20 fewer people on the payroll, 20 fewer people on the health care plan, 20 fewer pensions, $300 to $400 savings per household, and a more efficient and responsive government. And by the way, 7 individuals lost their elected position because there was a mayor and council in each town. There were 14 in total before, only 7 afterwards. This takes some courage. It takes some vision, but it's the right thing to do. Here's what I'll also do as governor. I will go up and down in the state advocating for the virtues of regionalization and consolidation of services, and where it applies, the consolidation of towns and school districts.
Good point. In a recent poll, our members, 70% of respondents favor a focus on shrinking government. You have your streamline as one of your things. How do you envision that you're going to go about this? People have tried, people have articulated the same thought, nothing has happened in state government. So,
this is going to sound terribly immodest, but it's not meant to be. I think that this type of challenge for the next governor, it actually comes very naturally to an MBA CPA business owner. Before the recession, my company was 30 people. After the recession, my company was 20 people. I will tell you that before the recession, it was pretty easy making money in my business. And I didn't realize how much inefficiency and waste there was because it was easier making money. We're actually a more productive company today with 20 people than we were with 30 people. Now listen, my heart bleeds for the 10 people that I had to downsize. But my responsibility as CEO of that company was to protect as many as I possibly could through the Great Recession. I will tell you this, in motor vehicles and Department of Treasury, we have our labor force in New Jersey government operating on DOS.
how many people are familiar with DOS? Okay.
I was with the Bergen County Young Republicans a couple of weeks ago, and I had 23 people in front of me, all under the age of 25, and I said DOS, and they're all looking at me saying, what the hell are you talking about? I'm telling you, with the implementation of state-of-the-art technology, we should be able to downsize, streamline, and modernize our workers, our operation in Trenton. So my pledge is to downsize state government by 10%. I talk to mid-level, upper-level managers across the board in Trenton in my 5+ years there, and all say the same thing. We are terribly inefficient, and we are wasting taxpayer dollars. So I will downsize state government, and I won't give that to you as an income tax cut or a homestead property tax rebate 2 days before the election. I will reinvest it in state government. Other states have done state-of-the-art internet hardware, software technology, and have done a skip the trip. Citizens and businesses don't have to go to motor vehicle agencies anymore. They can do everything over the internet. Everything over the internet. Think of how much pleasurable we can make your interface with state government as an individual or a business by implementing new state-of-the-art technologies. We desperately need this in Trenton. We are outmoded, we're antiquated, and terribly inefficient.
Because I'm sure if you're a governor and you would love to get paid by direct deposit. I just remember when one of our recent state treasurers came in and said it took him 60 days to get on direct deposit because of the antiquated system. Let's jump to another issue that is surfaced, and that's the whole talent issue here in New Jersey. And in particular, the fact that New Jersey, I believe, I think I'm quoting correctly, is the largest exporter of college talent or high school seniors. I think somewhere in the order of magnitude about 31,000 folks a year. How do we address that? Because obviously if New Jersey's going to come back, one of the things that's going to be key and important in that is having the talent pool. Every company, when they're thinking about relocating or increasing their footprint in a particular area, talent is a big issue, along with the other things that we've talked about in terms of taxes and what. What do we do? Because here in New Jersey, we spend probably the largest spend in K through 12. But when you flip that and go to post-secondary education, we're just, I think, abysmal.
So a couple things. Our higher education system is underfunded in this state because our K through 12 system is overfunded. I gave you the Asbury Park example. Why are we paying more per student in Asbury Park than it costs to go to Rutgers full-time? There's an imbalance in there. Second thing is people will live where they believe they can achieve their American dream. Too many people right now do not feel as though they can achieve their American dream here in New Jersey, and that's particularly with millennials. We do a fantastic job. Now, property taxes are high, way too high, but the glass is half full in one respect. Our K through 12 system in this state is phenomenal. We have the highest high school graduation rate in the country. The challenge is a great many of them go out of state to college and never come home.
Back.
So I see affordable housing as an economic development opportunity that also provides an opportunity for millennials to come back and have a place to stay and afford, whether it's through rent or through owning. I know none of you want the 4 Ciattarelli children to stay with Melinda and I for the rest of our lives. We've got to get them out. But here's the third thing, and this is something else we did in Somerset County. We have to stop taking a short-term Band-Aid approach to economic development. So first, I feel as though the New Jersey Chamber, NJCPA, Choose New Jersey, and the Business Action Center all have their oars in the water, but they're not rowing in unison or toward one very specific goal in which everybody has a responsibility. We need a comprehensive economic development plan that provides a long-term vision for New Jersey. We don't have that currently. And part of the way to achieve that is by what we did in Somerset County. We brought consultants in and said, what are the emerging industries of the next 5 to 10 to 15 years? Which emerging industries will be the engines of job growth? And they told us at that time, nanotechnology, biotechnology, and data storage. So then Somerset County sat down and said, what infrastructure, what resources do we need to have in place to make sure that those industries emerge here? And that's the way you approach economic development. Not by throwing $300 million at a company to get them to move from Secaucus to another county. And I just think we need something much more dynamic. So there's a number of things that we need to do in order to reverse that trend. People will live where they believe they can achieve their American dream. And once you get them to live there, something else starts to happen. A very, very, very dynamic, small economy starts to emerge. Go to downtown Princeton, New Brunswick, Morristown, even Somerville now. What do you see because people are living downtown? New mom and pop shops. This is how you drive the New Jersey economy.
We've talked a lot about the cost side of things this morning. What is your vision to increase the revenue side of the state's income statement?
Well, I truly do believe that my tax restructuring plan will change the optics of New Jersey, change the brand of New Jersey, and that's first and foremost. I just talked about what we need to do from an economic development perspective. I think that lends itself to changing New Jersey's brand. I mean, right now we've been ranked worse than the nation in business climate and #1 in out-migration. Do you know how hard it is to grow an economy when your population is stagnant and getting older? That's what's happening in New Jersey right now. It's the perfect storm working against us. So we need to reverse this, I think, with just a very, very dynamic plan. But Ralph, the key there is long term. What frustrates me so is we don't seem to want to make the painful decisions. And listen, you look at my 5-point plan, there's a little bit of pain in there for everybody. And it's not because I'm into pain. I already got 4 kids. The hole is this deep. You can't tax, borrow, or grow your way out of this. We need something much more comprehensive, much more dynamic, and there'll be a little bit of pain for everybody for the long-term gain that we all want. But we need to stop taking a 365-day Band-Aid approach to our state budget. With gimmickry and the like, we just make it always through the next 12 months with our budget. We're not doing things that are truly, truly dynamic, that have long-term positive outcomes. And this is what frustrates me so about planning here in New Jersey.
Okay. What is your solution to the massive payouts? This is another question coming in of unused sick days to government employees. I think you probably articulated that's something you probably wouldn't want to.
Well, I'm glad the question came in, because when I talked about employee public worker benefits reforms, I forgot to mention this. It needs to stop. Now, when I was a Somerset County freeholder, we reduced the number of annual sick days. We stopped the accumulation of unused sick and vacation time. It became use it, lose it. And we stopped the lifetime health care benefit. Now, it pains me that Trenton's going to have to be imperialistic and pass law of the land legislation for all 565 towns and all 611 school districts. You'd like to think that mayors and councils and freeholder boards and board of directors would take it upon themselves to implement this policy. But the fact of the matter is they haven't. We need to change this immediately. Here's the real downside. It's not just that it drives property taxes higher. Every time one of these stories comes out of a retiree who over 33 years didn't use a single vacation day and gets a check for $384,000, it angers people. It disenfranchises them. It incentivizes them to move out of New Jersey. That's not healthy. That's not healthy. We can't get to where we're going with people having that kind of mindset. We've got to put the right kind of policies in place, fair policies in place.
Okay. I think our last question here, and it's one regarding something that's been talked about on the national level about free public college education. And the question is, would you support a millionaire's tax to fund free public college education here in New Jersey?
No, I will not. And listen, I think the notion of college becoming a more affordable opportunity for all is a great notion and something we should all work toward. But I like it when people have a skin in the game, even if it's a small skin in the game. You know, when I talked before about Hoboken and Jersey City being overfunded, the city of Newark has a $1 billion school budget. Over $700 million of it is funded by the state, and $100 million is funded by the Fed. So they're paying less than 20 cents on the dollar for their schools. In my hometown, we pay 70 cents on the dollar for our schools. There's got to be a skin in the game. That has benefit in myriad ways when people have a skin in the game.
Well, I think that brings us to the conclusion.
Wow.
Any final comments that you'd like to convey before we close out?
Not at all. I welcome the opportunity, particularly to be with brothers and sisters in the CPA business. I'm determined to make the state a more affordable place to live, work, and retire. I'm determined to make it a more dynamic place to do business. And I'm determined to make it that most people feel like our best days are ahead. As I said, 62% think we're heading in the wrong direction, 7 out of 10 want to leave right now. We need to reverse that. We need to reverse that. And I think we can. With the right kind of leadership, new direction, new policies, new politics, we can turn it around.
Great. Well, certainly, Assemblyman, we want to thank you for taking time to be with your fellow brothers and sisters here in the profession, and thank you for tackling all these questions. I'm sure they haven't been easy.
Not at all. I enjoy it much, Ralph.
But we certainly wish you all the best, and hope that we can make New Jersey a place where people want to live, stay, and retire, and sadly to say, die in, and things. So
we can do it.
Thank you, and as a little parting gift, we want to just leave you with a little something here to thank you for your time here today.
I always wanted a bag with the emblem on it.
All right, you got it. And some other good keepsakes there.
Very good.
Thank you so much, and
Thank you.
appreciate all.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. Great job.